episode's picking up where the last one left off. I am still in Indianapolis. I went to the Indy Cylinderheads Mopar swap meet. Stopped, grabbed something to eat afterwards. And I've decided I'm going to take a run up to the National, I believe it's called the National Car and Truck Museum, north of Fort Wayne. It's a little bit of a side trip. Not necessarily, I don't think a lot of the stuff that's here is what I normally am into. But there's one car that I wanted to see that I found out a couple years ago was there. It is a Plymouth Barracuda that used to be owned by Tom Hoover, who worked for Chrysler and is considered the godfather of the 426 Hemi. This car happened to be one of his personal vehicles, and after it was sold or he passed, and whoever got a hold of it, I'll have more details on this when I get there. They also got their hands on one of Chrysler's prototype engines. It's called the Ball Stud Hemi. Truck Museum. There's probably a lot of stuff in here that's not really in my wheelhouse, but I'm thinking there's probably some pretty cool stuff. I know there's one thing in here that I want to take a look at, and it's the Barracuda from Tom, that was owned by Tom Hoover. It's got the Ball Stud Hemi in it, but let's see what else we find out. So let's head inside. So I wasn't able to do the video that I was hoping to do when I went to the National Car and Truck Museum in Auburn. I went there specifically because I wanted to see Tom Hoover's 69 Cuda that has the Ball Stud Hemi in it. Technically it's not Tom Hoover's car anymore, but at one point for a lot of its life it was. Once I got to the museum, went inside, talked to the gentleman at the counter. He kind of walked me in and showed me where the car was and told me a little bit about it. First thing I always ask is it okay if I video for my YouTube channel? And he said no. He goes, we don't allow video. He goes, but you can take as many pictures as you like. So doing a video of it while I was there, I couldn't. So I'm going to do it this way. I took some pictures of the car, pulled some research off of the internet, just so we could show a little bit more in detail the history of this engine. Some of it is old pictures from high performance Mopar, and I believe Mopar muscle. So the pictures, most of the pictures I'm using are things that have been published out there already. I just want to make sure everybody understands it's not all my stuff. Clearly it's not all my stuff once you see it. But, and I don't think this is, anything I'm coming up with is anything new that people don't know. I just, it was an opportunity to see a car that I've always heard about, and I wanted to see firsthand. Now, the car itself it's an original M code 69 Plymouth Cuda. It was born as a 3D3 car, automatic, B5 blue, and also the B5 blue interior. It was owned by Tom Hoover. For those who don't know who Tom Hoover is, which I can't imagine there's a lot of people that don't. Tom Hoover was one of Chrysler's engineers going back to the 50s, 60s, and into the 70s. Tom Hoover is pretty widely considered the father of the 426 Hemi. He also was part of the original Ram Chargers racing team. The Ram Chargers team was a group of young Chrysler engineers that wanted to take their ideas to the track, find things that worked, find things that didn't work. Probably their most notable, their first car was the High and Mighty. I believe that was a '49 Plymouth. That, while it's truly a weird looking car, that car, in my opinion, was ground zero for a lot of technology that came from it that gets used in pretty much every race car, a lot of street cars, things like the tunnel ram, probably first and foremost. The idea of tuned intake runners, not only for the tunnel ram, which it obviously is the predecessor of, but cross rams and long ram intake manifolds, things like that, where the intake runners are lengthened or shortened to pinpoint exactly where you want the power band in the engine. Tuned exhaust, 4-link adjustable rear suspensions, altered wheelbase, changing the center of gravity to enhance traction, things like that. It's a whole rabbit hole that I'm not going to go down here, but Tom Hoover was part of that. Tom Hoover was the head designer of the 426 race Hemi. That came out in 1964, was designed to be a all-out race engine for NASCAR. Engine was designed to make all power above 5,000 RPM and to be able to sustain that for hours on end. The 426 Hemi was then revamped into the 426 Street Hemi, which is basically different cam, take some compression out of it, hydraulic lifters versus solid to kind of tame it down so it's streetable. Because they needed to produce X amount of the 426 Hemi engines to make it legal to race. Drag racers kind of took it under their wing after they figured out how to tune it correctly. That would be thanks to Don Garlitz figuring out cranking a bunch of advance into it to get it to come to life. It obviously, that engine, it kind of went down in history as probably the go-to drag race engine. All top fuel, all funny cars, all run some version of what originally was the 426 Hemi. Tom Hoover was also involved in later projects, I believe like the Little Red Express, the kit car program in the 70s for stock car racers, like local stock car racers. But in 1969, he was on the team that was working on what is known as the A279 Ball Stud Hemi. The idea of this engine was to take the 426 Hemi, the benefits of that, the high horsepower, the head design, things like that, and incorporate it into their standard big block engines, the low deck B series 383 and 400, and the raised deck RB or raised block 440s. The 426 Hemi was a expensive engine to produce. They weren't, even in the street Hemi version, they weren't the greatest street engine. They like to be at high RPM. Whereas the wedge engines, the B and the RB series, were more mid-range, streetable, torquey, stoplight to stoplight engines. And Chrysler has always been struggling. They've always been the number 3 of the big 3. And they kind of realized, they saw the writing on the wall, that essentially having 3 engines based off sort of the same architecture didn't make a lot of sense. And with the new EPA ratings that were coming, they wanted to create an engine that would kind of cover all the bases. That's where the A279 Ball Stud Hemi started, the experiment started. I suppose it'd be a good idea to stop here and insert a little sidebar. Why is it called the Ball Stud Hemi? It's a nickname. Basically, it is in reference to the valve train system on it. A big part of what they were chasing was simplification of the 426 Hemi. And the 426 Hemi had a more elaborate valve train than the other big blocks, the 383 and 400 B series and the 440 RB series. They're all rocker shaft setup with stamped steel rockers on the B and the RB. It's very simple. You just, the rockers slide over the shafts get bolted down. There's not really adjustment to them. I always say they're tractor motors, very basic. The 426 Hemi also used rocker shafts, but it had two on each side, one for the exhaust and one for the intake, which made production more complex. The rocker arms themselves were more complex. There's about as exotic as you were going to find in an engine in the 60s, especially in the domestic side. It added to expense, it added to production costs, it was a race engine, and that's really what it was. And the A279 Ball Stud Hemi was an effort to simplify that and bring the cost down. In reality, there were only, I believe, 8,000 or 9,000 426 Hemis engines produced across the years. So they were a rare engine to begin with, simply because of the added expense. Most people didn't see the value in buying one for the street. It was all people that were planning on racing, for the most part. People that were racing, street racing or professionally racing, or you had some of the more upper economic class that were putting them in luxury cars. You'll see a few 426 Hemis and GTXs and Hemi Cudas and things like that, but those are extremely rare, extremely rare. So just thought I'd put that sidebar in there about where the name Ball Stud came from. It was in 1969, and they had about a year's worth of development into it. They were hoping to have like a 400 cubic inch version and a 440 inch version. Depending on where you look, there were as many as 12 prototype engines or as little as 3. The one that exists right now, the one that's in the National Car and Truck Museum, is essentially based off a 400 low deck or a B series engine block. They didn't use the cross bolt main. They didn't think that was really necessary for a street engine. They originally built it with the cast 400 crank. The pistons shooting for like a 10.5 to 1 compression ratio in this engine. Apparently, they say it got to like a dyno stage, may have even been put into a what's called a mule car. Essentially, somebody just drop an engine in to run the motor around. And then Chrysler pulled the plug on it. It was they realized the EPA and everything else was killing the muscle car, and it just wasn't feasible to do it anymore, to push it forward. And the engine sat, and they were mothballed. At one point, they were going to be sold for scrap. This was probably mid to late-ish 70s by this time. And the engine ended up in the hands of Dick Landy. Dick Landy was a Dodge pro stock, super stock driver, also built race engines for multiple people at DLI Industries, Dicklandi Industries. I believe his intention was to complete the development of it and put it in a race car of some sort and see what he could do with it, but that never really happened for whatever reason. At one point, he actually let the Chrysler Museum use it for display. Was there for a few years. Over those years, John Aruza, who is also a race engine builder, managed to finally talk Dicklandi into selling the engine to him. He immediately had plans to do what Dicklandi didn't, which is develop it, continue developing it, make it a running, driving engine. Like I said, well, the bottom end, or the short block, is essentially a 400 low deck. It had a standard 3.75 inch cast crank. He had a custom made crankshaft at 4 inches to kind of increase the displacement on it. To do that, that slight increase in it, meant that he didn't have to modify the inside of the block or clearance the inside of the block, because it's the only one out there. So he wanted to kind of keep that as original as he could. He also had custom pistons built for it that came in at 9.5 or 9.8 to 1 compression versus the 10.5 that the factory was planning for it to make it more streetable. One of the other issues that the engine had was that while on the intake side it flowed just as good, if not a little better, than the 426 Hemi, it was compromised on the exhaust side. They were trying to keep the factory or stock head bolt locations of the 400, and to do that they had to kind of compromise and actually, instead of having intake and exhaust valves directly across from each other, they had to kind of slant them across. This is where it really starts to look a lot like a big block Chevrolet engine. They had to do this to get around the head bolts. There's kind of like an S-shaped exhaust port. It also, compromised by the exhaust manifolds that had to be used on it. So he worked on, on that as much as he could without obviously changing the exhaust manifolds, because he wanted to keep it, externally as original as he could, being as it's a 1-of-1. Had a custom ground custom ground camshaft for it that put more duration into the exhaust side. Also to try and help out that crutch of the exhaust ports being not quite what one would want. In the end, like I said, I would call it an A2. It's not a factory, or as the factory wanted it. He's running a Holley carburetor on it. The Chrysler engineers had full intentions to run the thermoquad on it. So the plenum had to be changed a little bit for the Holley, and cosmetically he changed it up a little bit. From what I've read and seen, some people are not happy about that he should have just continued to develop it into exactly what the factory wanted. He chose to go and kind of improve on some of the things, and maybe these would have been the things if the factory would have done on their own, as they continue to develop it, if they could have continued to develop it. I will stand firm on my theory that if you own the car, you can do whatever the hell you want with it. He owns this engine. It's his to do with as he wishes. I'm just happy somebody got the thing running, and it's there for people like you and me to go and take a look at, and learn a little bit of what could have been. Like I said, the car and the engine have direct ties to Tom Hoover, which is, I think it's kind of cool that that's the car that it's in, that it's Tom Hoover's old hot rod that ended up with one of his, last Hemi developments. So, like I said, I wish I could have got, some video in the museum of it, but they aren't cool about that. So, I did what I could, took some pictures of it, did some research. Hopefully, there's something that you could have learned that maybe you didn't learn, maybe I'm just rehashing old information, but I've known the car's been there for quite a while, and I finally had an opportunity to go and see it. It is a weird little corner niche part of Mopar's history. Like I said, it's a window into what could have been. The thought that they were planning on developing a new performance engine that could cover all the bases, I think that's pretty neat. But history shows that that was not to be. To some degree, maybe there's a little bit of what turned into the 5.7 Hemi that we know today in this engine. Certainly the compromises in the combustion chamber that had to be made because of the head bolt layout, might play into the modern Hemi. Sometimes you have to sacrifice the performance for the practicality. So, long story short, I guess if you happen to be in the north central Indiana area, I would say stop by, take a look at it. It's a beautiful car. It's a day two, which I love. The stock 100% Concours stock restorations are great, but I love the one-off stuff. I love the weirdo things, and this really is. All you gotta do is take a look at the pictures. It's a beautiful car with a one-of-a-kind, truly one-of-a-kind engine. So I appreciate you tuning in. As always, if you hit the subscribe button, leave comments below, smash that like button, tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell everybody. Till the next episode, thanks for tuning in to Buckle Up Garage. Later.